Hi everybody! Today I'm going to show you how you can make this adorable bag. If you have done some of my upcycled clothing tutorials using men's button-down shirts, then you might have some shirt sleeve cuffs lying around that you're not sure what to do with. Or maybe you're just getting started with upcycling and you have some of these laying around. Well, I'm going to show you how you can use them to make this purse. It is so stinking cute. And I've used some other upcycled materials to embellish it. It's so fun to make and really so easy. So let's do it. The first thing I'm going to do is decide how I want my cuffs to be laid out for my purse. I want a front and a back, and then we'll do a flap for the purse. So I'm going to match up. I have 3 cuffs here that I'm going to use as either my front or back. I'm not sure yet. And then I have 3 more cuffs here that I'll use for either the front or the back. And then after I get the front and the back sewn together, I'll use probably about 3 cuffs, 2 or 3 cuffs to make the flap. So this is going to be either my front or my back. So what I'm going to do is this is going to be the top of the purse where, you know, you put things in the purse, the opening of the purse. This is going to be the top. And the reason is because I already have a finished edge here. I'm going to be cutting off the bottom part. When I sew the bottom together, it's going to be cut. So I don't want to have to sew a hem or a finished edge on the top. So this is already going to give me that finished top. So I'm going to line this up so that my cuffs are overlapping just enough so that I can do a stitch to stitch them together. I'm overlapping probably about 1/4 of an inch. And I want to make sure that the top is lined up. Now, as you see, most cuffs are going to have that curve. So if you get them too far apart, then you are going to have a little gap. But that's okay. If you're okay with that, you can leave it that way. But I'm going to overlap mine just enough. I don't want too much of a gap up there. So I'm going to overlap them about 1/4, maybe 1/2 of an inch. And then I'm going to start pinning them together. Now, these cuffs have a thick lining in them, so you're really going to have to push that needle through when you're pinning. And you don't need a lot of pins because you're not sewing a very long stitch, just enough so that they don't move around. So I'm just going to put, probably 2 is enough, but I'll go ahead and put 3. And then I'm going to do the same with this one, and then we'll be ready to sew these 3 cuffs together. Okay, so I have my cuffs all pinned together, my 3 cuffs pinned together, so I'm ready to stitch them together. And I am going to use a straight stitch, and then I'm going to go back over it with a zigzag stitch because it just gives it some extra hold, and I like the look of that anyway. I like the look of the zigzag top stitching. So I'll start with my my back stitch for reinforcement. So, and then just sew with my straight stitch, pulling my pins out as I go. And then, since I'm going to go back over it with a straight stitch, I'm going to leave my needle in the end there. Make sure my needle is down into the fabric. Lift up the presser foot and just spin that around. And now I will go back the other way with a zigzag stitch. Make sure I change my stitching. Okay, and one thing I forgot to mention is you want to make sure that you're using a heavy-duty needle for this because you're going through a lot of thick fabric here. So use a heavy-duty needle or a needle that's designed for sewing jeans or something like that. Now I want to make sure I turn my stitch settings back to straight stitch and do my reverse reinforcement stitch. And then I'm going to do that with the other cuff here. Okay, so I have my first 3 cuffs sewn together to make the one side of my purse, either the front or the back. And now I'm ready to do the other side. So I have 3 more cuffs here. And what you want to do first is make sure you're going to do the same exact thing with these as you did with this. But first you want to make sure that this is the same width as this. So before you pin them together, just lay it next to your first 3 cuffs and just measure and make sure that when you pin them, it ends up being the same width, because you want your front and your back to be the same. So that's the first step. And then you just pin them together and sew them just as you did this one. Okay, so I have the front and back of my purse sewn together, or I have the front sewn together and the back sewn together. I'm not going to attach them together yet. And I'm sorry that I did not video this part, but the next thing that you want to do is you want to cut the length of your purse. So obviously you cannot, it can't be any longer than your shortest cuff. So what I did was this is the shortest cuff of all 6. So that's where I decided my length was going to be. So I just lined this up. What I did was I put my front and my back together, back to back, inside to inside, and then this is my shortest cuff. I didn't have to cut that because it's the shortest one. And then I just cut right along where that cuff ended. So now both sides are the same length. So that's your next step. So now we're going to go ahead and make the flap for the purse. Okay, so now you're ready to make the flap for your purse, and it's going to be done the same way that you made the front and the back of your purse, with one exception. You want the flap of your purse to be a little bit narrower than the front and the back of your purse, because, okay, let's say this is the front of my purse, and this is going to be the flap. I'm going to use these 3 pieces as the flap. I don't want it to be as wide because I'm going to sew straps onto the side of my purse, and I want this flap to be able to lay right inside the straps. I don't want the straps to get in the way, so I want to leave just enough room so that when I close it, that the flap can go in between the straps easily. So that's why I want to do it just a tiny bit narrower. So I'm probably going to put like a spaghetti strap type strap on this purse. So I don't need a whole lot of room. But you want to keep that in mind when you're making your flap. So I'll just measure it up against the front of my purse and then pin it together so that it's just a little bit narrower than the front. Okay, so I have the flap part of my purse made. So now what I'm going to do is decide how long I want the flap to be. So you want to decide how long, okay, again, we'll say this is the front of the purse. How long do I want that flap to come down? You may want to cover the whole front of the purse. You may want a really long flap. Now it's going to depend on how long your cuffs are. For example, my flap that I made, this is actually part of a cuff that has already been cut. So obviously my flap cannot be any longer than this. I'm going to have to cut it right here. So if I put it up against my purse, this is going to be sewn to the back, and it's going to fold over like that. So the flap of my purse will come about over halfway down. I may not, actually I might cut it shorter than that because I don't want to cover up a lot of the front of my purse. So I think I'll make it a little bit shorter. Now you don't want to get it too short, because if you do, then it's not going to lay down, it's going to stick up and it's not going to close well. You want enough length so that it lays over and is heavy enough to close. So I'm thinking probably about like that. So that's about where I want to cut my flap. Now I want to make sure that I leave enough room for a seam allowance. So if that's how long I want it, then I'm going to have to cut a little bit, about 1/4 of an inch longer, because that's where I'll be sewing. So I'm going to go ahead and cut that. Okay, so I have my flap ready to be sewn on. It's cut at the top. All right, so now you're going to find the back of your purse, decide which section you want to be the back. This is going to be my back. So I'm going to sew the flap on to the top. And you can, I think what I'm going to do is put it underneath, because I want this nice finished edge to show. So I'm going to put it right underneath there, overlapping about 1/4 of an inch. And then I'm just going to, so there, see, I'm overlapping just about 1/4 of an inch, making sure that it's centered. And then I'm just going to sew that on, just like I've done all of my other stitches, with a straight stitch and then again with a zigzag stitch right across there, being careful not to sew over my buttons. Okay, so I have the flap sewn to the back of my purse, and this is the inside, and as you can see, this is the excess seam allowance, and I'm going to trim that off so that there's a nice clean edge on the inside. And another thing that I want to do is the buttonholes. As you can see down here, there are buttonholes. I'm going to stitch those together with a zigzag stitch, because if you have any tiny items in your purse, like maybe a lip liner or a pencil, you don't want things slipping through those little holes and falling out. So I'm just going to stitch those together with a zigzag stitch before I close my purse up. Okay, so I have I've sewn the flap to my purse, and I've trimmed the edge, the extra seam allowance. I've trimmed it off, and I have closed up the buttonholes at the bottom with a zigzag stitch. Here's what it looks like on the front. And now I am ready to sew the front of my purse to the back. So I'm just going to line this up so that the bottom is lined up and the sides are lined up. And I'm going to pin this together, pin the sides, bottom, and this side, and just sew around it with a straight stitch, and then of course again with a zigzag stitch. And there's a button here that I probably will have to end up cutting off because it looks like it might get in the way. It's pretty close to the edge. If it were further away, I would just leave it, but I'm going to probably have to cut that off. So I'm going to start pinning and then sew. Okay, I've already gone around the purse with a straight stitch, and I'm getting ready to go around it again with a zigzag stitch, and I just wanted to show you exactly how I do that to capture the edge. So I've already done my reverse reinforcement stitch, and it's set to a zigzag stitch. So I'm going to start sewing, and you'll see the needle is going off and on of the fabric. So by doing that, it's wrapping around the edge, and that just captures this edge really well and gives it a nice finished look. Okay, so I have the front and the back sewn together. So here is my purse, the flap. So now I'm ready to sew the strap on. Now the strap that I'm using came from a recycled dress. It's just the belt from a recycled dress. And I've already cut it to the length that I want. And the way I determined the length is I just threw this over my shoulder and decided where I wanted the purse to hit on my hip. And then I just measured there and cut it. So all I'm going to do is I'm going to put the straps on the inside, just on the inside like this, about halfway at the seam. And then I'm just going to stitch that really good on each side. I'm going to go over it a few times with a straight stitch and a zigzag stitch because I want that to be really secure because that it will be bearing weight. So I want to make sure that it's secure. So I'm just going to do that on both ends of the strap, and then I'll have my strap attached. Okay, I have my strap sewn on. So now I am ready for the final step in this purse, and that's adding embellishments. So what I am going to add to this purse is some fringe for the bottom, tassels actually for the bottom, and I've cut these roses from some vintage fabric, and I'm going to use those as appliques to sew onto the flap of the purse. This tassel trim actually came from this pillow that I ripped apart. I got this pillow at Goodwill for like $2, I think, and it's going to give me like 1.5 yards of tassel trim. So that's a lot cheaper than going to the fabric store and buying trim there. I don't know how much this would have cost at the fabric store, but it would have been a lot more than $2 for 1.5 yards. I do know that. So I'm just going to pin the trim on the bottom, and then I'll sew that on, and I'm going to put the appliques on with a special spray called basting spray, and I'll show you how I use that. It's a big time saver. You don't have to use a lot of pens, and it's really handy. So let me show you how I do that. Okay, this is the spray that I use. It's called Quilt Basting Spray, and you can get it at any fabric store, or I actually got this at Walmart, so most Walmarts probably sell it in the fabric section. And what this is it's like a temporary glue that you spray onto the back of your fabric, and then it adheres your applique to whatever you're sewing it to, so that it just holds it in place so that you can sew it. Now I use this box because when I spray, I don't want the spray to get everywhere, and I try to hold my breath when I'm spraying. So just put that in there, and it doesn't take much. And now I can just stick it on. Sorry, I'm getting all kinds of notifications on my phone and you're hearing it, so sorry about that. So yeah, so now it's stuck on. I didn't have to pin anything. I don't have to sew around a bunch of pins or remove a bunch of pins. I'll just stick that under my machine and sew a zigzag stitch all around those flowers. Easy peasy. Okay, so my purse is complete. I've sewn on my applique with a zigzag stitch. I've sewn on my fringe with a zigzag stitch. And you know, this is out of the box sewing. I'm not going for perfection here. I want something that is unique and raw looking. So I'm not trying to do perfect stitching and hidden stitching. I really want just the opposite. So that's what you have here. I sewed a little patch down here from the leftover fabric that I cut off from the strap. So that kind of ties it together. And I did the same on the back. And as you can see on the back, I didn't put fringe on the back or I didn't put any trim on the back. So I just have my raw edge and my zigzag stitching that's showing, and I put another patch, and I just love the look of that. It's unique and one of a kind. And this purse is a great size. It's not very big at all, but it's big enough to put your phone, a small wallet, lipstick, keys. So you have enough room for the essentials. So if you're going to dinner and you don't want to carry a big bulky purse, then this is perfect. So I hope you try this, and I hope you have fun with it, and let me know if you do. I would love to know how your project turns out. If you want to send me pictures, my Etsy shop is primitivefringe.com. There's a link below. I would love for you to message me and send me pictures there. And also, if you like this video, please tell me by liking it. And don't forget to click subscribe and click the bell so that you can see more tutorials like this one. Thanks!